Going to the question that was asked in terms of why is it fair, hellfire for disbelievers. So obviously in the Quran, in chapter 17, verse 15, the Quran says, وَمَا كُنَّ مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. We weren't going to punish people until we sent them a message. And which means to say that, God doesn't punish individuals, and this is the understanding of the scholars of Islam, that God doesn't punish people unless they have been given decent exposure to Islam, to the idea that God is worthy of worship, which should connect with your fitrah or your innate predisposition to believing in God. A predisposition, I may add, which is anthropologically justified through studies like Justin Barrett studies and stuff like that, which shows us that actually we're born with a quote unquote receptivity to believing in God. So we don't believe that all so-called disbelievers or non-Muslims are going to go to hellfire forever, but those who have been exposed to the message and deny the message. That's the idea of a kafir. A kafir is not just a non-Muslim. A kafir is someone who covers up the truth. Actually, in Arabic, a kafir is a farmer, because the farmer, he puts seeds under the ground and he basically covers it up. Funny enough, the word infidel is actually not bad for that, even though it's not great, because infidel is someone who's covers up the truth, right? So it's actually quite an accurate translation, So an infidel is someone who's linguistically covering up the truth, just like a farmer covers up the seed. Now, having said that, why is it the case that there's an eternal punishment in the hellfire for those who disbelieve in the message? That shows you the severity of the purpose of life. That's what it shows you, the severity of the purpose of life. I mean, the postulation or the presupposition, we should say, that, and Abdullah Andalusi, I'm going to give him credit for saying this one time, because it's stuck in my mind when he gave this example. I'm sure it's going to stick in you guys' mind as well. He said, look, it's not the case, that every time you do something as a crime, that you're punished in accordance with it in terms of time. So, for example, if I kill someone right now, if I bring out a knife and stab someone in their throat, or let's use a contemporary example. 6 minutes of when that thug officer put his knee on Floyd, George Floyd. So does he deserve only 6 minutes of punishment? I mean, I don't think anyone will say he deserves only 6 minutes of punishment. He deserves a very long punishment. We could argue what kind of punishment that will be here. But what I'm saying is, so the postulation that it should be time bound, that, okay, so if you do something for X amount of time, that your punishment should be the same, is false even on our worldly standards. So what we're saying is that the severity of the punishment is contingent on the severity of the crime. And shirk, or the idea of association of partners with God or disbelieving in God, is such a heavy crime that I want to de-scope this thing, because I don't want to make it seem, sorry to say, in this discussion, that atheism is some kind of acceptable option. With all due respect, if you die an atheist, you're going to go to hell and you are going to burn forever. With all due respect, if you die having heard the truth, you're going to burn forever. That's what we believe. And that is going to be the hellfire. It's a very severe thing. It's not like, armchair philosophy. You can just have a little biscuit, have a little tea, and if you're a Muslim, it's okay. If you're a Christian, it's okay. This is a serious matter, because actually you're born to believe you're born with the purpose, to believe in God. And if you can't even fulfill your basic human function, the punishment you're going to get as a result of that is so severe and so continuous that you're going to wish to come back and as the Quran said, and redo your trial here in the dunya, in the world. So
thank you so much for that, Hijab. Adam, please just hang on for a second. Hamza's book, The Divine Reality, actually covers this, and I just want Hamza to also cover this topic, and then we'll give Adam a chance to for any follow-up questions, because we've been waiting a long time. So Hamza, could you come in, The Divine Reality, in which you speak about the problem of hell and the particular question that
I don't think I talk about the problem of hell, but I think the way Hijab has articulated it is brilliant. It's the way I would have articulated it. But there's another question that Adam actually expressed, which was, I didn't choose to come onto this planet. I didn't choose to come on Earth. Now, there's two ways that you could attack that question. The first way is, well, in the kind of primordial sense, before our souls entered our bodies, if you like, Allah said in the Quran that He asked us, who is your Lord? And we all said, you are our Lord. So we had that kind of agreement. but also even just from a philosophical position, Allah is your creator. He doesn't have to ask. He doesn't need your permission. Like, imagine if I make a Lego robot and then I say to Lego robot, should I put your battery in now? Yeah, it's my robot. Yeah, Allah. And this is our kind of metaphysic, the way we see everything. And this is part of what you call the oneness, affirming the oneness of the divine. And they're like 3 general aspects of affirming the oneness of the divine. Number 1 is the oneness of his creative power. The fact that he owns everything. He owns me and you, right? We don't have this kind of neoliberal presupposition that, I own myself. You could talk about that in your own, within the liberal universe. Yeah, you could talk about that. But the fact of the matter is, Allah owns us, right? He's the master and over everything. He has power over everything. He created everything. He is the Lord of everything that exists. And then you have the oneness of his names and attributes, which we affirm, and we believe that they're unique and that they're maximally perfect without any deficiency or flaw. His names and attributes are to the highest degree possible. And we believe in the oneness of God's divinity, meaning that, he is the only deity worthy of worship, and that we must single out and direct all acts of worship to God alone, the internal acts of worship of the heart and the external acts of worship to the acts of worship of the limbs as well. We direct that to Allah alone. So, once you understand that, then the question of, well, I wasn't given permission, I didn't want my life, or I wasn't asked to come on earth. So we don't have that position, because by virtue of the fact that Allah owns us, Allah, the master of everything, he owns our bodies, he owns everything that we do. So those are 2 ways of addressing that question, the other question that you raised.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Hamza, and also for some of what I was referring to in terms of hell was what Hamza was referring to in terms of Imam Ghazali and getting.
Oh, right. Okay, good. So so
you forgot what's inside your book.
Yeah, so the scholars of Islam
right now.
Yeah, the scholars of Islam have discussed this. They basically said, like, even Al-Ghazali, the 11th century polymath and theologian, he basically said that, I think he was talking about the Byzantines. He said, look, if there's a whole town that all they hear is negativity about the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, then, do they have, are they going to be excused? And there is a hadith, a prophetic tradition that is authentic, that talks about the 4 non-Muslims that actually go to paradise. And they include the ones who are too old to hear the message, the ones who were, I think, majnoon, insane, and the other 2 categories I forgot. But the point is that they get tested on the day of judgment. And in a particular tradition, an angel or God says to them, go into the hellfire. And then when they throw themselves into the hellfire, it turns into paradise because they obeyed God. And obedience is an expression of worshiping the divine. So they fulfilled their purpose of existence, of being in reality. They fulfilled that purpose. So we have a very nuanced tradition. It's not, black and white from that point of view. But at the end of the day, if you heard the message and you reject the divine, then exactly what Mohammed Hijab said, then you're in huge trouble. And this is the whole point of YouTube channels like this, Mohammed Hijab's YouTube channel, Subboor's, Imran, in order to articulate and convey the message in the most intelligent and appropriate manner to awaken the truth within you, because the truth is already within you, that God exists and that he is worthy of worship. But the final thing I just want to add, just to summarize, we ask the wrong questions sometimes. We say, how can a loving God send you to hell? That's the wrong question. The question should be, how can you choose hell over a loving Lord? And that's what we forget. We have chosen hell over a loving Lord, because Allah says in the Quran, for non-Muslims to understand, Allah says he prefers belief for his servants. Do you know what this means? Look at the classical exegesis here. This means that God doesn't want to harm you. He wants your guidance. He doesn't want you to go to hell. We choose hell, as Allah says, and we did not wrong them. They wronged themselves. We make the choice. We close the door to divine grace and mercy. And then you have to face the consequences.
Hi, my name is Marilyn, and I don't have a belief system, but I am wondering why individuals of your faith believe in this form of, what is it called, damnation or hell or punishment in the afterlife. I don't believe that there is a punishment in the afterlife. I believe that we are here to evolve as human beings, and we are here to become like divine love source. You guys call him Allah. But this punishment, it doesn't make any sense to me in that regard. Why would he, or the God you believe in, put you on an earth to punish you eventually for making a mistake that will cause you to eventually evolve?
Okay,
become
before we answer your concerns that you have raised, would you mind, just sharing with us why should we believe in the concept that you have? What makes your concept to be true? That indeed is what mankind should follow?
Well, I'm not here to like persuade anybody to believe in anything. I believe that when you die, you create your own reality. And if you punish yourself and you put yourself in a mental state of hell, then you would go there. But I believe that people have their free will to choose where they go in the afterlife, how they create their heaven. And I just don't understand this whole torment thing.
Sure.
That
the whole question of afterlife, or even the very existence of a creator, I mean, we need to have sort of a foundational belief first in terms of our reality. Do you consider this reality, there is no creator behind it? I mean, what I'm trying to get at simply is your position one of agnosticism or atheism? Do you believe that this universe is all there is, or there's a creator who created or brought about this universe into existence?
I believe there's an energy that breathed life into us, and that we're here to evolve and become like that divine love source, become like God.
Okay, so Subboor, would you like to just clarify some of the concerns raised?
Firstly, thank you, Sweetheart Love, for joining us on the live stream. So I'd like to just make a few points, very quick points on this. The first point is that you said you don't have any beliefs. I just wanted to just say a few things about this. All human beings have beliefs. We all have to have beliefs, because human knowledge would not be possible unless you start off on what philosophers call basic beliefs. So you do believe the world is real, you do believe truth is valuable, you do believe good is something that we should do, bad is something we should avoid, you do believe in justice, you do have some moral beliefs, like you, for example, said, I don't like the idea of punishment. So you clearly have beliefs. We all have beliefs. So this idea that we don't have beliefs is not true. The second point is, I just want to ask you a question and then continue this point. Do you disagree with the idea of punishment? Like, I'm talking about even the idea that, for example, if I take this book and I throw it at you, or I throw it at a child, that human action deserves some form of justice, that punishment is just part and parcel of justice?
I believe there is a reason to have some type of rules, boundaries, but I'm talking about like the punishment where Christians believe in this hellfire, you're eternally there, and you can't evolve and come out.
Yep.
This hell, this torment, I don't believe in that.
So you disagree, from my understanding, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you disagree with the severity of the punishment, not the idea of punishment, the general idea, which is part of justice, that, say, Adolf Hitler, he had to face some form of punishment for what he did. We weren't going to let him off for what he did. So am I correct in understanding that your problem is with the severity of hell, not with the general concept of punishment?
Yes, so.
Okay, good. So second point I just want to make is that if you have a belief in justice or morals, that belief itself has to come from somewhere, right? And what we've argued previously as well, and we can go into it if you want, is you cannot have a concept of justice or right or wrong or good and bad without God. So those things don't exist. So the second point I'd just like you to let me know your thoughts on. Do you agree with proportion? Meaning, if I steal £5 from Mansoor, and after a few years, £5 will be deducted from me. So do you agree with things have to be proportional in terms of justice, in terms of punishment, in terms of reward? So if I do 5 minutes of work, I deserve 5 minutes of money. So do you agree with proportion?
Yes, I agree with proportion. I also agree with trying to understand why the individual may have stolen. For instance, like if somebody was poor, they needed to feed their family, and they steal something. Am I going to automatically punish them for trying to survive acting out of desperation? Or am I going to be somebody who would give the individual some other options besides trying to steal? Would I offer that person a job?
Yeah.
And in his mind or her mind, they stole because of a good reason. They needed to survive.
Yeah.
But the way I perceive it, if somebody stole from me, I could perceive it as, oh, they're trying to attack me, or I could perceive it as they needed it.
Yeah.
So
And you know,
I believe that's proportion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and that's what Islam takes into account in terms of proportion. So if somebody steals, say, out of hunger, not out of greed, they're treated completely differently, and they may not be actually punished at all, depending on if they just did it because of need rather than greed. So that's part of proportion. So you agreed with the idea that punishment as a general concept, you don't have a problem with that. You have the problem with the severity. Okay, 2, you agree with proportion. 3, if you agree with these 2 points, then the third point is that if proportion you believe in and if punishment you believe in, then if a finite being, a human, hurts another finite being, a human, then you have proportions, right? However, if a finite being, it does a crime against an infinite being, against a being that in terms of magnitude is incomparable, then the punishment is just as severe. So following on from the first point and the second point, hell is not a logical problem, it's an emotional problem. And I've dealt with this many times, so has Mansoor, so has Hashim. Oftentimes, when we break it down logically, if God is all-powerful and all-knowing and God is supreme, and the greatness of God and the glory of God is exactly what the theists say it is, then a microsecond of disbelief in God could result in an infinite time in hellfire. That's not a logical problem. Now, of course, God can forgive, and we have many different things in Islam that God can forgive, but also the idea that God is all-knowing. So God knows if a person had 1,000,000 years, or if they had different circumstances, they would still do the same thing. So I just want to highlight something, which is the problem of hellfire is not a logical problem, it's an emotional problem. And the simple answer to that is that whether we like something emotionally or not does not mean it's not true. So our beliefs, our emotions, no matter how strong, they don't change the structure of the universe. I hate the idea of Muslims being in concentration camps in China, but my emotions and my anger and my rage does not change those realities. So I just want you to appreciate that it's not a logical problem, it's an emotional problem.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. But also in regards to, I forgot what I was going to say. Some people, for instance, like in India, in that area, they believe if you kill a cow or their god, they perceive it as extremely evil. But in other people's eyes, they consider it as, nothing. It's just a cow. So it's like the perception of good and evil. Where do you guys get your perception of what's evil and what's good?
Very good question. So we believe there's 2 sources from which we recognize good and evil. The first is an innate compass that's in all human beings, which can get colored by society. Philosophers call this core morality. Core morality is the reason why we can even talk to each other, even if we disagree about morals. So if I disagree with the idea that a cow is so sacred that you can't even take out its milk, which some vegans may subscribe to for human consumption, and I believe that it's perfectly fine to have a milkshake, we both agree on some certain things. We agree on justice, we agree on proportions, we agree on right and wrong. It's just our philosophies and our ideas which change things. So philosophers, moral philosophers, they make a distinction between core morality, which all human beings subscribe to, and general moral norms and ethics and imperatives which people subscribe to because of their beliefs or because of their customs or traditions. So core morality, like we all believe in the idea that you have the right to what you own. We all have the basic ideas that lying without a good reason is bad. Murder is bad without, if there's no justification for taking someone's life. So we believe in that internal, what philosophers call core morality. And secondly, we also have a belief that through revelation, we are told of certain things, right? Now, we're told of certain things by God. However, God also tells us something, which he says to us, sometimes our own compassion gets in the way of justice. So, for example, I may find out that my daughter is stealing, and I don't want to apply a punishment of stealing on her because she's my daughter, so now I have a conflict. So God teaches us that ultimately we should subscribe to the truth regardless of how we feel about it.
And then I'll explain it. I just want to see your reaction first. Okay? From our perspective, we were talking about value, and we talked about moral relativity, and on atheism and naturalism, how actually everything is relative. And this is the prevailing philosophical position of most post-enlightenment, post-modernist philosophers like Nietzsche and Bertrand Russell and Jacques Derrida and others. Yeah, we'll come back a little bit. So in other words, moral relativity suggests that you make your own morality, right? You make your own purpose, you make your own morality. From an Islamic perspective, we say that obviously God, the all-knowing, the all-powerful, the all-wise, he is the one who sets the standards, he's the one who makes the morals. For us, the worst sin, the worst thing to do, worse than murder. Wait, what's going on? Worse than murder is this thing called shirk, and I'll tell you what it means. Shirk is the association of partners with God. Before I want to say something, I want to make a controversial statement first, yeah? I'm going to make a controversial statement, a ridiculous statement, and then I'm going to explain the statement. Let's suppose that this is on Islamic theology, yeah? You come out from planet Earth, and there was this imaginary button, yes, but you're a Muslim. Let's say you pretend you're a Muslim. There's an imaginary button, you press it, the whole Earth blows up and destroyed.
That's not a great button to have.
It's not a great button to have, right? Let's pretend that button exists. You go now, you're on the moon, on Mars, you go there, button, crazy button, press the button, everyone blows up. You would think that's the worst thing you can do to human beings. And it is. I mean, from an Islamic perspective, killing one person is like killing the whole of humanity, right? It says in the Quran, chapter 5, verse 32, that killing one person is like killing the whole of humanity, right? So murder is one of the high sins in Islam. It's not like we don't appreciate murder. We do appreciate it. But the ridiculous statement I wanted to make to you is as follows. Do you know that button that you press and the murder and all that stuff? If someone had pressed that button and killed everyone, and he was a Muslim, it's less severe than doing this thing called shirk. It's less severe. It's very severe. Very, very severe, no doubt. But it's less severe than doing this thing called shirk. What is shirk then? The question. I mean, what is shirk? What is this thing that you're talking? You press that button. What is it? Okay, I'll tell you. Shirk is when you give the rights. We believe in God. God, the creator of the universe, the heavens and the earth, everything, yeah? The maintainer, the sustainer, etc. Shirk is when you give the rights of God to other than God. That's basically it. What are the rights of God? The rights of God from the Islamic perspective are as follows. First and foremost, the attributes of God, as we know, he's all powerful, all strong, all knowing, etc.
How can he be all those things? That's what I want my question about God to be.
I'll come to that. Can we put that into a footnote?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. How is a good question. I'll put that into a footnote. Please remind me of it. But let's presuppose he is all these things. He's all knowing, all powerful, all everything. Yeah, all powerful, all loving, all merciful, most merciful, etc. Yeah, not all everything. That's a bit of an exaggeration. All of those things that I just said. Most merciful, most all powerful, most wise, etc. Yeah. Now, yeah, omnipotent is all powerful, really. Yeah, omnipotent means all powerful. Okay, omnibenevolent, whatever. Okay. The question would be this, and I want you to remember that question I asked you before. What makes the difference between a tree and a human being? So why is it that if I cut down a tree now, most of humanity would say that that's less of a crime than cutting a human being into two? The reason why, your subjective reasoning, which I didn't disagree with, yeah, I agreed with it completely, was that the tree has the intrinsic values, that tree has are less superior than the intrinsic value that the human being has. The human being has a higher level of attributes, or the characteristics of the human being are superior to the tree. Therefore, the human being is being assigned more value by other human beings, and is therefore more important than the tree. Okay? We say the following. What of an entity that has a value that cannot have a value higher than it? Let me say that one more time. What of an entity that has a value that basically, I'm not going to use the word unlimited or infinite, but there cannot be a higher value than it. Yeah? I say the only possible relationship, and this is the Islamic thesis, the only possible relationship you can have with that particular entity is one of ultimate obedience, ultimate love, and ultimate fear. Let me say that one more time.
No one can beat the end. No one's more powerful than the entity.
Nothing is exactly.
Disagree with it because it's the most powerful thing.
Exactly.
But
not only power, we said knowledge and wisdom. So all of your attributes that you have, as I'm sure you are, and you as well, very intelligent people, right? Very clever people, etc. All of those all those characteristics that you have, now basically imagine that those characteristics were that you cannot get higher than them. Basically, that you are the most powerful. There's no one can touch you, no one can beat you, no one knows more than you. You know, if we bring all of human beings, not forget about the speaker. Sorry, I'm going to knock you out here. All of human beings. Forget about Speaker's Corner. All of the human beings in the whole world, we put them together, and we have some kind of apparatus, we have some kind of mechanism, we have some kind of way of putting all those human beings' intelligence together and aggregating all of that intelligence into one sum. Yeah, all of those human beings would be closer to knowing nothing than they would be to knowing everything. Can you imagine the level of ignorance we have? Can you imagine the level of ignorance we have? We are ignorant. There's too much going on in the universe. There are literally 2/3 of the undersea that we have not even explored yet. And this is planet Earth. Imagine the universe, right? That's human being. Now imagine an entity that has all knowledge. He can hear all. He's all seeing. That is an entity we're saying is untouchable in that sense, in that figurative sense, of course, yeah? Now, what we're saying is that the only possible relationship you can have with such an entity is one whereby you're submissive to that entity. You cannot have another. That is the most appropriate, in terms of appropriacy, that is the most appropriate relationship you can have with that entity. In the same way as you would find killing that child an egregious transgression of the human rights of that child. The case, because of the intrinsic characteristics of that child, we say is the same reason why shirk, association of partners with God, is the most egregious transgression or crime that anyone can make on anything. In other words, just like the child has rights, the creator has rights, yeah? So when someone realigns the appropriate relationship they should be having with the creator and they realign it to the creation, we say that that is the worst possible realignment.
But what happens on that day, billions and billions and billions of years' time, when we have literally seen everything, done everything, worked out everything, there's no illness, there's no... Human beings are perfect, we know everything. What happens to that entity then? What happens when we have all the knowledge and there's just... Like, why should we strive to get there rather than obey someone that is there?
What I'm saying to you is this. That entity, if we presuppose its existence, it doesn't have an end, right? It continues. And we're saying that human being will never reach a point where it knows everything, by virtue of its insignificance on the universe. Its placement on the universe is an insignificant placement. We will never be able to encompass all that which is around us. For that reason, we say that, look, when we're talking about that appropriate relationship, Now we'll go back to our analogy, the ridiculous thing that we said, that I know to secular ears it sounds like the most ridiculous thing you can ever say. Not killing one child, killing all the children, not killing one human, killing all the humans. Press a button, you're on Mars, press one button, every human being blows up, the whole planet Earth is blown to smithereens, yeah? We're saying, for a Muslim to do that is one of the worst things you can possibly do, right? It's you know, you're going to hell, you know, how dare you do that? But that is not as bad as the person giving the rights of God to other than God. Why? Now you might say, what the hell are you talking about, my friend? What the hell are you saying? The reason why is because the aggregate value of all of those human beings on that planet Earth, as we've talked about value assignment, and this was a big theme of what we were talking about today, the aggregate value of all those human beings combined on that planet Earth doesn't even amount to a drop in the ocean compared to the value of God. Therefore, when we talk about God's value, inappropriacy when it comes to the rights of God has a more severe implication, has a deeper consequence, has a higher ramification. For that reason we say this. We say that the most appropriate relationship to have with an entity that is all powerful, all knowing, all hearing, etc., is that relationship of submission. That's what Islam actually means. Islam is submission to one God. And the biggest crime of humankind is to misappropriate that relationship and to assign the rights of God to other than God. That's the biggest crime. That's, from my perspective, the clearest thing I can say about the Islamic thesis. Do you get that?
I will demonstrate that today's debate is not about any real intellectual objections, but purely emotional objections. God is justice. There is no higher values that transcend him. So this debate is meaningless to a theist. However, what can be discussed is whether God is consistent with his treatment towards creation. When God declared in the Quran he will not be unjust, this means that no one will be dealt with in an unjust manner. And it is the veracity of this promise from the Islamic perspective that I will demonstrate today, inshallah. The main objections to hell are typically, is it just for God to punish by means of pain, or what they call torture, in the afterlife? Is it just for God to maintain punishment for eternity, or what they call infinite punishment? We'll discuss that. Is it just for God to judge and punish humans in the first place, which I think relates back to this determinism discussion. In light of this, I will demonstrate three things. The right of God to hold humans to account. It is fair to hold human beings to account, i.e. human beings can be judged. And the justice of the recompense of hell. Now, the right of God to hold human beings to account. So why, can God even hold us to account in the first place? Is this fair? Well, firstly, I want to expose an underlying bias behind this discussion. This bias comes from liberalism, which believes that man is totally free of any control, that man's purpose is to enjoy life and to experience pleasures, and that man is the best arbiter of what is good for him, i.e. man is the decider of his own purpose and destiny. We need to challenge this underlying concept, because it would imply that God is an interfering interloper, and that we have no need of. Therefore, his judgment and punishment of us would be unjust, since man would in effect be a separate God who exists as equals with God, a'udhu billah. And because it believes that man is deserving of pleasure, it abhors the concept of hell. This is why you'll probably never see many public debates discussing whether paradise is just. Infinite pleasures for finite deeds, is that just? But God is not an interloper who exists on equal terms with us. He is an infinite creator and maintainer of everything that exists, including us. Reality as we observe it, the universe and even the animal world, are certainly not acting according to liberalism. Maybe they didn't get the memo. But liberalism is philosophically contradictory, irrational, and unwarranted by evidence of creation itself. So the purpose of the creation of man and free will is responsibility and duty, not autonomy and hedonism. God has a right to define our purpose, just like he defined our existence. If something creates other things for no reason, then this creator has no will and is just random. But if a creator possesses intentionality, i.e. will, then that which he creates possesses purpose. And this purpose constitutes the establishment of the relationship between us and the Creator. We therefore are God's own creation and his property, of which he exercises the right of disposal, i.e. the right to do so, with as he pleases. God has defined that he should be worshipped by us. This takes the form of recognizing him as the infinite and unlimited being that initiated the heavens and the earth. He is thus the sole reference point for all our belief and action. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, do you think that we created you in jest without any purpose and that you would not be brought back to us? So, is it fair now to hold human beings to account? For human beings to be fairly held accountable, there must be 4 conditions fulfilled generally. The humans held accountable must be aware, to some extent, of the gravity of the actions that they are going to be undertaking. 2, the humans held accountable must be the origin of their choices, not something else. And 3, the humans agreed to undertake the trial of fulfilling their purpose by consent, although this is not absolutely necessary. And 4, mitigating circumstances should be taken into consideration. So God is not a robot which is going to just punish you or judge you according to a fixed criteria. He'll take your individual circumstances into consideration. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Allah does not charge a soul beyond its capacity. So first, humans held accountable must be aware to some extent of the gravity of the actions they take. No one will be punished without them being reminded, forewarned, and given chances to accept the truth. The people being sent to hell will be asked, according to the Quran, that did not messengers come to you from amongst yourselves, reciting to you the signs of your Lord, and warning you against the encounter of this day? They shall say, yes indeed. And then it goes on to say, how evil is the lodging of those who are proud. So they rejected this. So basically, if you haven't received the message, then it's not your fault, right? You have to wait for the message to come to you, or you to encounter this message by some way, shape, or form. So that's fair. The humans held accountable must be the origin of their choices. Now this goes with determinism now. Have some fun with this. In order for humans to be accountable, the actions they make must have free will to make choices. Free will is disputed by materialist neuroscientists who portray humans as robots acting automatically. However, experimental results do not actually show that. We'll get into that a bit later. But saying there's a consensus of materialist neuroscientists and saying that this, look, they believe in, materialism, it's a fact now. It's pretty much like me going to the Vatican and saying that there's a consensus of priests that Catholicism is true, and hence that must mean it's a fact which I have to accept. No, these people are just subject to bias. For example, the steady state theory, where the universe was deemed to be eternal and never changing, and the famous atheist scientist Fred Hoyle rejected George Lemaitre, who was a Catholic priest, ironically, the Big Bang theory, and he called it the Big Bang theory, because he thought that by accepting the Big Bang theory, you'd introduce the need for a creator. And so he actually opposed it, and for a great long while he tried to prove the steady state theory until evidence just overwhelmed them, and then they all accepted it. But the majority of scientists at that time believed that the steady state theory was correct. Now, the experiments which he's referring to, and there's a whole bunch of them, they do show that the subconscious is responsible for initiating impulses to act in humans. But this does not deny accountability of free will. The Quran talks about agreeing to an impulse suggested by your nafs. These new claims that the subconscious has a powerful effect on our behavior is old hat to Islam. We don't call it subconscious, we call it nafs. And of course, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and so the nafs of Qabil, referring to Qabil, encouraged him and made it fair seeming to him the murder of his brother, and he murdered him and became one of the losers. So you had Qabil, who was basically being incited to action by his nafs, but surely the nafs is also part of your brain, right? So it's not two people, but it's showing there's the will of us, the soul or the will of us, and then there's the nafs, and the nafs initiates. Look how the nafs initiated the proposition for Qabil to murder his brother. Qabil did not come up with that idea initially. It was, i.e., his desires initiated it. And again, preeminent neuroscientist Benjamin Libet, who started the entire enterprise of experiments on free will in the first place, demonstrated by experiment that the human conscious possesses a minimum of 150 milliseconds to veto any impulse originating from the subconscious. So your subconscious basically initiates a desire, and your conscious can veto it, can stop it, and choose a different action. You see, so this veto gives us a moral responsibility. You can't say, I felt like doing it, so I did it. No, you could have stopped yourself from doing it. And Benjamin Libet, the person who came up with the whole bunch of experiments in the first place to look at materialism or determinism and free will, himself is saying this, and it's demonstrated by his experiments. And I'm going to quote a few more, but time is limited. The Prophet Muhammad said that Allah has forgiven my ummah that which is whispered to them and which crosses their minds, so long as they do not act upon it or speak it. So what is that? That's veto, right? You're only punished if you don't veto your desires and you follow your desires. And again, the ayahs of the Quran are numerous on this, and hadiths. I just selected two. So it's like, to give you an example of how the mind works, it's like being in a company. The workers, your subordinates, produce the proposal. The analysts make the calculations, but in the end, it is the director which decides which proposal to pick. That is, in essence, what these neuroscientists have been saying, who are not biased by a certain materialistic bent. Now, humans, the third point, humans agreed to undertake the moral trust of fulfilling their purpose. Before creation, before we were put into creation, we were asked by God, do we want to accept this moral responsibility? The heavens and the earth, all inanimate objects which were given the capacity to understand, shirked away from it. But human beings accepted. So if we accepted it, then we can't blame other people, other things for our predicament. We did accept this upon us, and Surah 33:72 says this. There also is mitigating circumstances that should be taken into consideration for human beings to be fairly held accountable. If humans are prone to following their environment and circumstances, then is the afterlife fair? Well, the human propensity to be swayed by environment and conditioning is mitigated by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which He weights our good deeds by multiples of 10 and our bad deeds only weighted 1. And also, and again, Surah 6, Ayah 160 gives you that. God will show 99 times more mercy to us on the Day of Judgment than all the mercy that has ever existed in the entire universe. And, of course, He will forgive whole swathes of our sins just based on a few good deeds that we've done, or even a few moderate deeds that we did consistently. And I'll quote the ayah on this. Those who believe and work righteous deeds, from them shall we blot out all evil that may be in them, and we shall reward them according to the best of their deeds. And furthermore, if that wasn't enough, in Allah's mercy, He has sent down to us a revealed law system to create an environment that limit public temptation to commit evil and establish socially reinforced values and ethics to aid psychological maturity. This is why Mohammed, who brought the revealed guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is called a mercy to mankind. So in order to help us from these temptations which might affect us, and from our environment, we're going to change our environment to prevent these temptations in public. So in conclusion, it is just that humans should be held accountable for their intentional actions. Now the final part, the justice of the recompense of hell. Let us first ask the question, what do we mean by justice? Justice is giving to someone what they deserve based upon what they are or what they have done, i.e. their intrinsic value or the value of the actions they have done. For example, in the human world, a person that works hard in the job deserves payment. And a baby is a vulnerable human being that intrinsically deserves care and sustenance. So justice must involve giving to them what is deserved. Now, why is there pleasure and pain in the afterlife? Well, it's for the same reason there's pleasure and pain in this life. Pleasure and pain is experienced by living created beings as motivations and consequences. We need feelings to move us, and we need feelings to reward us for fulfilling our purpose. For example, like contentment after sexual reproduction, or to warn us, i.e. stop us putting our hand into the fire, or as suffering to remind us and absolve us. The necessity of their existence emanates from our created purpose. So pain and pleasure emanates from our created purpose. Thus, in the afterlife, we will be accounted for our adherence to our purpose using the only thing we can experience. These two sensations, pain and pleasure. This leads us to the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the creation called hell. It is a recompense for bad actions and is a residence for those who intrinsically deserve it. Let us first look at hell as a recompense for bad actions. Hell will be used to settle the balance of bad deeds for unrepentant and thus unforgiven sinners who will then be granted paradise. And there is a hadith, a very beautiful hadith, where there will be intercession of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who will find anyone in hell that even has an atom's weight of belief, or an atom's weight of belief, and they will be taken out of hell. So this is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you did bad deeds and you're in hell, you will be taken out of it at some point. But people do not have a problem with this view of hell. However, they claim hell produces an infinite punishment for finite actions. But hell is everlasting, not infinite in existence, nor does it punish to an infinite degree of pain, even at the lowest levels of hell. What I mean by this is everlasting is not infinite. Our souls are everlasting, but we're not infinite. No one's going to say our soul is infinite. So hell is not infinite, and nor is the degree of pain you experience infinite. It's finite. It's always going to be finite, but it's going to be everlasting. This is something different now. I want to also give a difference between action and sin. Sin is the value of intentions behind the action, not the action itself. So, for example, a doctor using a knife to cut you open for an operation is not a bad thing, but a rioter on the street that stabs you, for example, is a bad thing. So sin can cause a greater evil than merely the time it took or the effort it took to commit it. So, for example, I could inject someone with a very strong poison and kill them in 10 seconds. But clearly, my act would not deserve only 10 seconds of punishment or a gentle squeeze with a thumb. Because the significance of my action is much greater than my action. And we accept this just intuitively and rationally, so this is not a problem. So the moral value must depend on the magnitude of the significance of the intentional action. Rejecting the rights of someone has a negative value equal to the degree the right was offended against and the gravity of that right. If I attempt to lock someone up in prison, I have impinged upon his right, or rather I've committed offence against his right. But if I kill that person, that's a greater offence against their right to life. As I have shown, God has the right to be worshipped alone because he is the infinite and unlimited creator. To intend to associate partners to God, which comes in many forms, is to attempt to claim a limitation against his power and being, as the existence of equals to him would constitute a limit to his power and existence. So tell me, what do you think is the gravity of denying God as the infinite being and derogating him to finitude? What is the magnitude between the finite and the infinite? The gravity of that action in the eyes of God is severe in the extreme. In fact, this crime is so severe that it merits from God an inexhaustible punishment against an unrepentant criminal. Anything less than perpetual punishment is an injustice to God's right. Some people ask, how can God punish unrepentant associators and rejectors forever? I ask, why should he not? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Allah forgives not that partner should be set up with him. Less than that, he forgives to whomever he will. Whosoever associates with Allah anything has indeed forged a mighty sin. Ithm azim. The word azim, mighty sin. Which is interesting because one of Allah's names is Al-Azim, the mighty. So this is how severe this sin is. First, the Quran confirms the gravity of the sin of Shirk. This brings us to discuss the type of people hell is designed for. Hell is also a residence for people who intrinsically deserve it, I will argue. Purpose is the measure of our intrinsic worth. If we become intrinsically against our purpose by becoming a rejecter of God, such that it becomes the very nature of us, then we can be called intrinsically evil. Such a person will now deserve to have their rights to fulfillment permanently rejected by means of frustration in the afterlife, or what we call pain. The rejection of God by these people is perpetual and without end, so why shouldn't their recompense also be? If you could but see what they made to stand before, when they're made to stand before the fire, they will say, oh, would that we be returned to life on earth and not deny the signs of our Lord and be among the believers. But what they concealed before has now appeared to them, and even if they were returned, they would return to what they were forbidden. Indeed, they are liars. Now, this is what Allah is saying in the Quran. That in hell, they say, yes, please, if you take us out, we would worship you and we would be, devotional followers of you. But they're saying this because they're being punished. They're not repentant of it. They're saying this, and the true nature of their soul has become manifest. Life has now manifested. Their true colours have come out. And so if they had been returned to this world, they would again go on rejecting God, denying him to his face, so to speak. And so they are indeed liars. You may ask, why doesn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just destroy them? But this would allow them to escape their sentence. It would be unjust of God to let a rejecter leave hell when they have not reformed themselves, or they cannot reform themselves. How many kuffar, what we call rejectors of truth or God, would gladly spend a limited duration of millions of years in hell just for the chance to do what they wanted in this life and defy God for the sake of their egos? This would be the afterlife equivalent of letting out of prison an unreformed murderer and rapist. Therefore, the punishment of hell is just. In summary, I believe that I have demonstrated rationally, with support from Islamic textual sources, the right of God to hold human beings to account is just. The holding of human beings to account is just, and the recompense of hell is just. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, and fear the day when ye shall be brought back to God. Then shall every soul be paid for what it earned, and none shall be dealt with unjustly. Thank you.